Hi all, I'm going to do a special video for another one of my British Championship losses in reverse chronological order from what I showed you before. So this is the round 10 against James Cobb on AM 2440. So I was playing white. The day before I was kind of elated. I just beaten Peter Sauer, rather swindled him. He had a winning position and I was lucky and had an interesting unbalanced ending where in theory he had material advantage, but it was difficult to convert that. Pardon me. And his king got in trouble. So I think I didn't have proper sleep before this game, but I was very excited, and I was on 5, so I'd already beaten my score from last year by half a point with 2 rounds to spare. Actually, Cobb's rating according to this is 2432, so that's to be more precise. Pardon me. I think I'm at the end of the cold. Anyway, the thing I want to demonstrate with this game is not so much the game itself, but how my sort of model of the game kind of collapsed in this tournament. And this game in particular was symbolic of some of my theoretical ideas, how they collapsed. I'm not saying I have my own version of my system by Nimzovich, but what I did believe in was, A, I wanted to, in inverted commas, strategically crush opponents, and B, I was interested in the last few games, that I'd been playing in the club, where I'd been winning dynamic games. I was interested in the notion of positional sacrifices and also in unbalancing the position, strategic trump cards. So I thought I'd taken Silman's idea, of imbalancing the position, and I thought there's a new model in that. You can have strategic trump cards, but also if your position gets better and better, I think there's a natural point where there's this notion of a positional sacrifice, which you should always look for as well, or potentially several positional sacrifices which can take your position to the next level. That's a bit of a corporate phrase, taking to the next level. So anyway, so how did this idea of the positional sacrifice completely backfire straight out of the opening here? Well, I played e4 and he played e5. I was expecting him to play French defence. And no, he'd already surprised me with this. So I thought, hang on, I've got a secret weapon. I've been playing lots of blitz games with the Vienna. And in particular, I've been doing a positional sacrifice frequently, sacking on e5 if you look at my blitz video. So I played knight c3. And he played, actually, bishop c5. He didn't play knight f6 or knight c6. And I was wondering about this. I was wondering, is this a bit of a bluff? Is he sort of, I don't know, seen my blitz videos in the Vienna and he's actually prepared this system? Because now f4 doesn't look that appetizing. Let's have a quick look. f4. I know we're going to take several videos to get through this game at this rate, because there's a lot of philosophy I want to sort of put into it. It's not just the game itself. So bear with me. But this is just an important variation to consider. With f4, we're actually trying to undermine d4, so maybe it's not such a bad move. Let's say bishop takes g1. According to Rybka, white's got a big advantage already, 0.37. So what the hell's happened, you may wonder? Takes, say check, g3, grabbing this pawn materialistically, rook g2, queen h6. And now, although white's pawn down, white does have that advantage of collecting black's dark square bishop. So look at these dark squares. Control of d4 is potentially going to be less, etc. And also, there's a concrete resource here. The queen's over there. c7 is vulnerable. So knight d5 according to Rybka. Say black tries to defend, then takes. This isn't so easy now, actually. I didn't really want to go into this maze, but knight c7 is not quite right because king d8 and black's better because there's this threat of queen h1 here. So, but in this position, actually, queen f3 is good for white. Don't want to go into too much detail, except to say that, you know, f4, it seems playable. You know, if white can play f4 and bishop takes g1 is no good. You know, say d6, then white can immediately play d4 as well. So this d4 control is critical. Bishop c5, you know, pretends as though it's, you know, contesting d4, but it does mean that f4, you know, does pack a punch here. So where did I go wrong so quickly? I had this idea of a different positional sacrifice. So it's like there's candidate positional sacrifices. You can either lose a pawn like that, or you can try and do something else. And because of a pattern from a previous game, I tried to do something else. I tried to play knight f3. I'll tell you the reason. Because in my game against white, there was a beautiful idea of, you know, knight takes e5. Well, quite a logical thematic idea, which has been played a lot before. And white ends up with a big advantage like this, because again, d4 collapses for black, and you can sometimes pick up the bishop. So here, takes, and you know, f4. This is probably going to be better for white, because look at black's control of d4. It's weaker than usual. But the unfortunate thing is, after knight f3, black does a different kind of trade-off. Black plays d6, and I thought this would be fine as well, actually, because I remember, you know, one of the Blitz games and looking it up on chessgames.com and thinking, well, white's actually statistically better here with the move knight a4. But it turns out there's a big kind of practical problem with this, even though it was seemingly statistically better in chessgames.com. The thing is, it's really difficult to play this position because black has a strong clamp potentially on d4 if you get this dark squared bishop. And Adam Raouf had commented after the game that he'd seen lots of games like this where, you know, black gives up that bishop, gets this clamp on d4, and it's difficult for white to do anything. But I had planned something, you know, which I thought was special in this position, which was a different kind of positional sacrifice, trying to, you know, boost the potential of this dark squared bishop. So I played b4, and so far we've seen that I've missed one positional sack with f4, which would have sacked a pawn on this side and got the opponent's dark squared bishop. But I headed for this one, which still gets the opponent's dark squared bishop. But there's a bit of a downside. You know, black's got this, you know, bind on d4. I think against a stronger player, once they have a bind, it can be very uncomfortable. You have to start predicting, you know, lots of horrible knight maneuvers, etc. And it's difficult to, you know, to liberate some of your pieces if you're faced with a bind. So I thought, yeah, this is going to be it. b4. I'm going to break out of this bind with this positional sack. So is there a downside? Well, he played knight f6, and according to Ribka, white's still better, which I find quite interesting actually. With just taking on c5, So say knight c6, bishop d3, queen takes. Apparently white's okay, but I'm not really convinced because black does seem to have a strong bind on d4 still, and the advantage is actually shriveling to 0.13. I think it's very difficult to play, to be honest. And this bishop, you know, hasn't got that many useful squares, and we could see this getting quite bad and unpleasant for white, I believe. Maybe castles queenside here. Surely black is fine because of that control of d4. Say this. I can't believe black can be that bad. Okay, so I played knight a4, and so this happened, and b4. The opponent, though, you know, he played knight f6, Okay, so this was the opportunity for b takes c5. Instead I played bishop b2. And again, my opponent, he didn't like take on b4. Instead he increased his bind really on d4. He played bishop g4. And it seems there's a significant difference now between taking on c5 or not taking on c5, and black apparently ignores it, which begs the question, why couldn't black have ignored b takes c5 in this position? So b takes c5, couldn't black have just castled here? And I think that's the case. Black can just castle here and delay capturing on c5. So he still ends up with this nice bind. Doesn't have to immediately take on c5 and just casting, and he can recapture that pawn at leisure. So say this position, it doesn't look that great. Look, this knight is also coming in potentially to a useful square.